Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for Introduction to Revenue Funnel Building, how to use Pardot and Salesforce to build your funnel. So before we dive into the good presentation, I want to take a few minutes to just introduce the presenters. So with me today, I have Stephanie Gahn. She has a background as a corporate communications writer and holds a master's degree in marketing. Stephanie has worked with a diverse range of clients in a variety of industries to modernize their sales and marketing strategies. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Molly Bodensteiner, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Funnelwise. Funnelwise is a revenue diagnostics tool that uses data from Salesforce and Pardot to help businesses develop the right actions to significantly grow revenue results. So let's dive in. So today, we're really going to focus on what a revenue funnel is, how to really build your revenue funnel foundation, the key metrics businesses need to measure when looking at the revenue funnel, the importance of having a strong data foundation, and then Stephanie is going to explain how to really automate your revenue funnel blueprint using Pardot and Salesforce. So what in the world is this revenue funnel that I'm talking about? So revenue funnels have tons of different names. They might be called a buyer's journey, a lead life cycle, serious decisions, demand unit, waterfall, marketing and sales funnel. But for the purposes of today's presentation, I'm going to refer to it as a revenue funnel. And the definition, for what this revenue funnel is really the business process organizations use to generate, transition, and nurture prospects from marketing through to sales on their journey to becoming a paying customer. I like to think about my revenue funnel as really what is saving me from random acts of marketing and saving sales from fly by the seat of their pants sales. It's helping our business really make sure we're talking to the right prospect at the right time with the right message. So revenue funnels are really important for businesses for three main reasons. The first is that they help to align sales and marketing efforts. So they help to make both sales and marketing accountable for the journey that prospects move to becoming customers. Secondly, they predict revenue. So when you have an operationalized revenue funnel and you're gathering that data and using that historic information, you can project, how many future closed-won deals you're going to have, what your revenue forecast looks like. And, especially for marketing, you can help make smarter decisions about your investments. You can start understanding the ROI of certain campaigns and pieces of, trade shows, how they're moving people further through the funnel. And lastly, it's a platform for future success. So your revenue funnel helps to create a repeatable, scalable, and measurable process and really build that path to revenue. So at Funnelwise, we have a methodology that we use called revenue funnel science. And it really is, three critical actions that businesses need to take to really produce the most revenue from their funnel. The first step, and this is the step that I'm going to focus on the most today, is building that foundation and putting together that blueprint for revenue funnel success. Then you work to connect those dots. So you start taking the data from your funnel performance and really start to understand, what future projections look like, where you need to spend, better investments and make the right decisions for your business to grow revenue. And lastly is operationalizing the funnel, which is really putting that revenue leadership team together at the top of the organization to help produce top-down strategies for success. So behind every successful sales and marketing organization is a well-tuned funnel. So I like to think about, if I were to go out and build a house, which I have no intentions of doing, I'd probably take, some wood and nails and hammer and, start putting a house together maybe, but I probably wouldn't be very successful if I didn't have a blueprint or a plan to follow. And that's the same thing, with this revenue funnel blueprint. It's really where you start to produce revenue as an organization. The blueprint itself is a simple written definition of the stages of your funnel. And stages, the best way to think about stages, in my opinion, is just groups of people who are at the same level of understanding and engagement with your solution. So I know, here where I'm at, school started this week. So when you think about, grades are stages. They're similar things that they're learning and understanding as they grow. So you wouldn't put a kindergartner and a sixth grader in the same group. Same thing with your revenue funnel. So you want to think about, the people's level of engagement with your platform. So somebody who has went to a lot of your webinars or attended, a conference that you were sponsoring and has had that interaction with you probably knows a little bit more than somebody who's just finding you through a Google search. So when you're starting to build your blueprint, there's really, core qualities that every blueprint should have. The first is the consensus. So when you're working on building this blueprint, anyone who's involved with the process has to agree and have buy-in. So, if a company's marketing team is just putting the blueprint together and, not getting any buy-in from sales on it, the likelihood of sales actually following it and feeling like they have any accountability with it is really low. So that's why it's important that it's a joint effort between all people involved in the process. Next, your blueprint needs to be comprehensive. So it has to address all the different scenarios that a prospect can encounter. So here at FunnelWise, we have a qualification stage, our MQL stage, and we know not every lead that hits that qualification stage moves into a sales opportunity. So our blueprint has to take into account that people are going to leak out of that MQL stage and move into our nurture stage, where marketing is going to keep re-engaging them to hopefully move them back to qualified. And last quality is really, your blueprint has to outline who owns what. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more on my next slide. So when you think about your funnel, it's important to think about it in 3 separate sections. The first is really that TOFU acronym, top of funnel, which is really marketing's responsibility. This is where marketing is working to build awareness about the problem your business solves, help to generate interest and initial engagement. Then you move into the MOFU, which is the middle of the funnel, which is really the shared responsibility between marketing and sales. For a lot of businesses, this middle of the funnel area is a big point of friction between marketing and sales. It's where a lot of misalignment happens because neither team is really accountable for what the other team delivers before or after the qualification, which is why it's really important in this stage that you have that feedback loop. So marketing understands, what are the right qualities of qualified when they're passing from sales, and sales is consistently giving feedback to marketing about who's coming further down the funnel. Additionally, it's important that you're educating on how the prospect can choose the right solution within this middle of the funnel. And lastly is your BOFU, which is the bottom of your funnel. These stages are really sales responsibilities, typically the opportunity stages. It's still important for marketing to be involved and help support, but it's really explaining why your solution is best. So when you think about, your revenue funnel and you have your blueprint in place, then the next thing is really understanding, what are those metrics that your business needs to be tracking. So if your business is not measuring your funnel with key metrics, you really can't improve it because all you do is just have this process, but you're not actually making decisions off of it and gathering the right data. So there's really 5 metrics that I recommend businesses look at. The first is movement, which is really how are leads moving through your funnel or prospects moving through the stages of it. This gets compared to volume, but there's a difference because volume is really just that quantity within a stage where movement is how things are actually progressing through. The next metric is velocity, and this is really your speed to revenue. So how fast are records, or slow in some cases, moving through your funnel from stage to stage. It's important to look at velocity at a stage by stage level, but it's also important to look at it from an overall funnel perspective so you really start to understand, what your average sales cycle is. The third metric is conversion rates. This is probably the most common metric that businesses look at is, the rate things are moving from stage to stage. And then the last 2 metrics are kind of the orphan metrics. I know a lot of companies really don't prioritize in looking at these, but they're really important. So with aging is really the shelf life of a record. So at FunnelWise, I know in my MQL stage, if a record has sat in MQL for longer than 30 days, the likelihood of it moving forward is very, very low. So aging helps you understand, how old are the records within each stage, and at what point do you need to move them out of that stage and either hand them back to marketing or close that opportunity and start putting them into more of a nurture stream. And then the 5th is activities. So activities, looks at the touches marketing's having as well as, the tasks and events sales are doing within a record. And so it's important to understand, back to that fly by the seat of your pants sales, what are the right touches at the right time. So now that, we've really talked about building the foundation and understanding those core metrics, I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie, who's actually going to, I'm jumping around, sorry guys, who's going to start talking through how do you actually build this within Pardot and Salesforce. So let me hand presentation rights over to her and she will walk you through that.
I work with clients all the time on implementing these strategies and working with them to optimize how they're using the automation that is available in Pardot and Salesforce and what you can really do with the tools to grow your sales and create a better experience for your prospects and customers. So this is a really, really, really important topic. If you are in a situation right now where you are trying to grow sales, you're trying to hit very specific benchmarks, having this detailed out, having this outlined in a blueprint having this documented is hugely important. I want to go back to a point before we get into some of these slides here that Molly made, and that is the issue of alignment. So if for a lot of you, if you're in marketing and you haven't been in that practice really of working closely with your sales team, and you really didn't know that you needed a sales hat too, that might be a little bit of a foreign concept. But when I look at organizations that are high performing, they're hitting their sales goals, they are knocking it out of the park, they have a really tight alignment between marketing and sales. They are working day in and day out together to understand what that customer experience should look like, which is kind of controlled by marketing, but how we can combine together to build a process that is delightful for our customers, but also works to meet our sales goals and works to convert our web visitors to leads, our leads to MQL, our MQLs to SQL, and finally to closed won. So, you know, for a lot of you, if you're not often working in Salesforce, and Salesforce is still kind of a foreign concept, you're not in there day in and day out, I would really encourage you to look into the basics of Salesforce, get really familiar with the tool, sit down with your sales team for a couple of days, walk through their process with them. That's really going to help you understand what some of your opportunities might be to kind of tighten this process and maybe define that blueprint in a way that's more effective, and it's actually going to help you reach your goals. So working together is hugely important, and it's also going to help you understand your buyer personas a little bit more and help you to be more responsive to them during that sales process. Another thing that Molly always emphasizes, and I heard her say it a couple of times in this presentation, is that you know, getting into this scenario where you have a blueprint, you have these processes documented, this is going to help you feel more stable and more controlled in how you approach your marketing. So a lot of us are getting pulled in a lot of different directions, and we're really not sure which road to go down first. And this is really going to help you stay focused on the ultimate goal, which is driving revenue and hitting your sales goals. It's not just about generating those leads. We've got to get these to a point where they're actually closed won sales or actual viable opportunities. Okay. So the importance of a strong data foundation cannot be overstated. Every organization struggles with maintaining a clean database where you're always making sure that your sales reps are filling out critical data points, especially, you know, filling out things that you might need in marketing. You know, we're taking care of things like if somebody moves on from an organization that you work with, that you have an account with, you know, what do you do with that person's record? How do we handle those thousands and thousands of old dead leads that you might have? How do we handle situations where you've got an email bounce and you've got some list churn? So we want to make sure that in marketing, we have at least some oversight of how that database is built and how it's maintained. Because if we don't have this built in the right way, or we don't have clean data and organized the way that we need it, we're just not going to be successful. So you always want to be using the standard Salesforce object structure, which is listed here. So you've got your leads, contacts, accounts, opportunities, and campaigns. These are the objects where you can really leverage the standard process that Salesforce has. And if you're not using these, it's a little bit more difficult to use some of the functionality, especially campaigns, around campaigns, which is your closed loop reporting tool. And it's also a little bit more difficult to bolt on other apps that you might want to use, including Pardot. So Pardot is built to connect with these standard objects. If you're a little bit more advanced, you might have custom object integration, which is great. But there's also there's tons of apps, there's thousands of apps in the App Exchange. So we want to make sure that we're using these in the right way, because when we start to grow into other things and grow our ROI in Salesforce, those apps are all built based on that standard object structure. You also want to be thinking about automation in your funnel. So we can't completely automate the sales process unless maybe you have some sort of e-commerce system, but we can do things from Pardot to help our sales team prioritize their day, prioritize what leads are actually showing interest in us, which is going to help that velocity and moving them through that funnel faster, and that's always a good thing. So one of the things that I see as kind of a common misstep in sales is stepping into the sales cycle before that lead is really ready to engage. Ideally, you want your marketing to get out in front of that lead so they can educate them and get excited about your product or service. And then when they're ready to move towards the decision, that's when they're more likely to engage with your sales rep in a more constructive and meaningful conversation. So that conversation turns from education into give me pricing, and that can really help your velocity. So in the lead object, generally you want to start folks in an open status and move them towards MQL before your sales team engages. And you can automate that signal of how they're moving through that lead status through Pardot. So you can do lead scoring and grading, or just lead scoring if you haven't quite gotten to the grading yet. And you can actually say, hey, Pardot, once somebody reaches a certain score, let's go ahead and advance them from an open or a nurture status into MQL status. And you can do that in an automation role. Here's an example of how we have ours. So we build the automation rule, and we are looking for if the prospect score is 100 and their lead status is open or nurture, we're gonna advance them to MQL, and we're gonna notify sales that they're ready for a follow-up call. Now, if the sales rep engages and they find out, you know what, the prospect is still really early in the research stage, they're not really ready to move on to additional conversations or discussions around pricing or anything like that, we need to recycle them back. Well, we can do that too. And we can have that automation rule loop so that every time they hit that 100 score, we advance their status, and that sales rep may decide to reach out at that time. You also want to be thinking about automation in your communication, and that's one of the reasons that you bought Pardot. So at each key stage of the buyer's journey and the revenue funnel, we can send targeted and relevant information to our prospects that's going to help them make that buying decision and ensure that they're going to be successful once they do make that decision. So we don't want to be thinking about just Pardot just in terms of nurturing a brand new lead. We want to be thinking about using it as our communication tool to continually provide a great experience for our customers throughout our journey with us. And really fine-tuning your funnel, as Molly described, is going to help you do that easier. So documenting your funnel, it's going to help you get started with automation in Pardot. I have a lot of clients who start with one triggered email or maybe one 3-step engagement studio series for each stage of the funnel. So that basically translates to your prospect's life cycle. So if they're in the status of nurture, we know we can send them an awareness or an educational series in Pardot Engagement Studio, or even just one triggered email through an automation role is a start. That's a starting place. And then if we see a lead move to SQL and an opportunity is created, we can track that in Pardot. But now we need to suppress that person from the nurture and the awareness campaign and flip them to the acquisition series. And in that series, you might send them pieces like case studies, maybe a versus or some sort of product comparison. You could send testimonials, ROI examples, things that are going to really help them take that leap across the finish line to that closed-won sale. And then when their opportunity close won, we can actually move them to a list that triggers an onboarding campaign. How can they be more successful with your product or service? And then after that, there may be certain signals, depending on how your system is built, where we know that this person is satisfied, and maybe we can send them some sort of a referral program or loyalty program. So there's a lot of ways that you can use Pardot, and automating the communication in these life cycle stages or that funnel blueprint is a really great way to strengthen and grow your sales. All right. And finally, in everything you do, you have to be thinking about reporting. I sent a link out to a really great ebook that Molly put together on this whole concept of revenue funnel science, and has a lot more examples of reporting that I really recommend flipping through. So if you get a chance to download that, that's going to be a little bit more specific. But you basically always want to think about reverse engineering your reports to see how you need to construct that funnel. So I've got a couple of very simple examples here. If you want to show, for example, your conversions of leads to SQLs each month, there's a great report out of the box if you're using a leads object That's going to show you the lead conversion rate. So that's bringing the lead in from lead generated basically to SQL. And you can see that. The report on the right is just opportunities by stages. And this is where we've kind of simplified. We've taken a step back and we've actually simplified our opportunity stages based on what do we really want to know? What is going to help us understand opportunities and that flow to help us make better decisions, or even to automate targeted emails from Pardot. So if I was going to send an email campaign based on where my prospect is on each of those stages, well, I've really only got 3. So it's a lot easier to kind of think about that communication point when you kind of simplify, take a step back and look at what do we really need to measure in our opportunity stages, which is what is really going to give us some information. So moving on to key takeaways here. So the benefits of a revenue funnel, it's going to strengthen that alignment between marketing and sales. It's going to get that conversation started. And that's just hugely important in being able to make sure that you're aligned, not just in the goals, but you're aligned in the process and the technology. So we're not going to just say, well, our goal is to generate $5 million in sales this year. We have to be completely aligned in the process, and getting that conversation started by building that revenue funnel will help you. That revenue funnel science also helps you predict revenue. It helps you stay focused on what do I really need to do in marketing, what is really important. And it kind of simplifies what you need. So if you've got this laid out in a nice funnel and you know your lead statuses, you know your opportunity stages, it gets a little bit easier to identify your lifecycle marketing strategy and how you can build Pardot to really accommodate that. And of course, that's a platform for future success. So implementing a revenue funnel, documenting this. Again, that ebook that I referenced, there'll also be a link in the success community to that. There's also a link in there for a really nice blueprint worksheet. And I would highly recommend that you look at that and fill that out. That's going to really kind of help you start to organize how do I go about doing this. And of course, you want to stabilize your data foundation. It is never too early to start cleaning up your database. If you know that there's probably a lot of dupes in your database, if you know that you're not using, let's say, the lead object, for example, or you've got a high bounce rate, you've got a lot of addresses going out invalid in Pardot, this is the time. It's never too early to start taking a look at what does my database really look like. That database is hugely valuable. And if we are not maintaining it constantly, things start to fall through the cracks, and it gets a little bit more difficult to automate things. It gets a little bit more difficult to report on that funnel. So it's very important to this whole process. You want to be thinking about places where you can automate things. So automating the advancement of the lead status, we talked about that. We talked about automating communications in Pardot through by using the different lead statuses or opportunity stages that are in your funnel. And then always keep reporting top of mind. You always want to be reverse engineering your reports, and that will help you understand how does my blueprint need to be built? How do I need to organize things in Salesforce so I can get the reports that I need or maybe my executive team needs? All right. Here again is the Introduction to Revenue Funnel Building ebook that explains way more in depth some of the concepts that we talked about today. So definitely highly recommend that. And with that, we are done with the main presentation, and we'll go ahead and take some questions from the audience.
All right, so looking at some questions here, Stephanie, Erica asked, what are the 5 core revenue metrics again? And I did message that to her, but for everyone else, the 5 core revenue funnel metrics are movement, velocity, conversion rates, aging, and activities. And then Andrew asked if we could explain the difference between grading and scoring. And I did message Andrew back as well, but Stephanie, I'm happy to just kind of take another stab at that. And just for everybody on the line, scoring is based off of prospect activities. So that's really evaluating how interested the prospect is in you and your business, whereas grading is based off of set or specific prospect criteria. So that's grading is more so, and that's not out of the box. That's something that you kind of set up based on your ideal prospect profile inside of Pardot, and that's really how that's evaluating how interested maybe you or your business should be in that prospect. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Andrew, and everyone else on the line. And then let's see, Molly, Stephanie, we've got a question from Krista. If we can drop the ebook link in the chat box. And Stephanie, I think you already did, correct?
Yes, I can put it up there again though.
All right. And then Erica has a few other questions. I don't know if either of you want to address this, Molly, Stephanie, but she has a question about what are some good apps or approaches to clean up a database? And she also asked about best practices for campaign function. But again, yeah, happy to, this always can be a team effort too, but yeah, if one of you wanted to take that.
Sure, I can take a stab at that. I think sometimes it's really apparent that you have some database cleanup to do. So you just in your day-to-day activity in Salesforce, you are looking for people and you realize that somebody is duped. So we often use Excel a lot. So we will report, we'll do a report as Salesforce and then export it into Excel and kind of manipulate the data to understand, okay, well, how many dupes do we actually have? Or if you're seeing that a lot of your emails out of Pardot are bouncing. So that's kind of some insight into, okay, well, my sales reps may not be staying on top of who might be in our database. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach it. I would start with looking at the core objects. So your leads, contacts, accounts, opportunities, looking at the fill rate maybe in those fields. So are you finding that you're popping around to a lot of different records and some of them are missing key information? So that's kind of a clue into, okay, well, we've got some cleanup to do in our database. So I would start with those core objects, look at some reports in Salesforce, download that data in Excel and kind of manipulate the data. And some of that duplication will seem more apparent. There's also some duplication tools or dedupe tools out there. There's tons of options in the App Exchange, so you can take a look at that if you think your requirements or your problems might be a little bit more expensive. As far as the campaigns go, that could be definitely a whole webinar in and of itself. There's a great campaigns resource that Salesforce put together. I believe if you type Salesforce campaigns implementation, you'll find it. It's a PDF and it's an implementation guide, and that goes through really everything you need to know about what campaigns are and how to use them.
And just to chime in with what Stephanie said regarding the duplicates, is it's really important to identify the root cause of why duplicates are getting created, but then it's also important to figure out how you can prevent them in the future. So Salesforce has the native duplicate rules and matching rules. Those are amazing. We use those at FunnelWise internally and have been able to take control of not allowing sales reps to create duplicates and instead helping them to find the match.
All right, and it looks like we have another question. How can I start the conversation with our marketing and sales leaders to create a funnel blueprint?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. Yeah, so ideally your business, if you're generating revenue, already has a funnel. So there's already stages that records are going through to get to opportunities. So then it's really bringing in those right leaders and getting their buy-in. Talking to, whether you're in sales or marketing, getting that buy-in from your leader to work with their counterpart to really make it an organizational effort to build and document this blueprint. I mean, so a lot of businesses have like bits and pieces of it. They're using lead status and they're using those opportunity stages, and there is a process that people are going through. The issue is that marketing and sales haven't worked together to really document it and really make sure that they're tracking the right pieces. So I know it really helps, you know, put as much of it kind of like look in your database, look at those stages, see how things are going. And then, you know, I just use, you know, a simple PowerPoint kind of like table and start, you know, documenting each line. And there's actually a worksheet in that ebook that'll help with really starting to document that blueprint out and start putting in some of those initial metrics so you can start seeing some of that reporting. And I think, you know, the more you can bring to one of those leaders, the more they're going to buy in once they see that value.
And I think I would add on that, you know, a lot of people are thinking about these things in a compartmentalized way. So they're looking at lead status and maybe they're changing some of the values or what that lead status looks like, but they're not at the same time doing the opportunities. So thinking about this holistically from start to finish, that'll also really help organize and document the whole process and not just take a look at bits and pieces of it.
Absolutely. And one thing I would caution is a generic revenue funnel is never going to be an effective one. So I've worked with a lot of companies who come in and just take, you know, what the serious decisions demand waterfall looks like and try to conform their business to just kind of that generic example. So you have to make sure that your blueprint is really built, you know, based on how your business functions, whether that means you have 5 stages or you have 15 stages of your funnel. Like, it has to be customized to your business.
All right, and it looks like we've got 1 or 2 more questions here. Another one, we've been tracking metrics like conversion and velocity, but how do we know if our performance is stacking up against similar organizations?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So, you know, as you're tracking those things and looking through them, it's really important to do benchmarking. So, you know, both internal and external benchmarking. And so internal is a little bit easier because, you know, you can start comparing yourself, you know, comparing sales reps against sales reps, comparing time periods, but external gets a little bit tricky. So actually what Funnelwise has done is we've really taken and done a long-standing research on, you know, what are the qualities of top performing revenue funnels. And you can actually, on our website, within the homepage, there's a way you can actually request a benchmarking report. So we'll actually integrate your data and actually tell you where you guys stack up compared to other organizations. So I say, you know, internal benchmarking is really helpful, but it's nice to external benchmark as well to see, you know, how are you performing to others.
Great. And last but not least, we've got a question from Joseph. Could you guide me toward a resource on preventing duplicates in Salesforce and enabling our sales team to find matches?
Yep, I will put that link in the chat box too, unless Stephanie, you want to.
Nope, you can take that.
Perfect. Yeah, I know there's several different tools like I know there's a dupe catcher and a few other Salesforce related try to prevent those duplicates. So good question, Joseph. All right, looks like we don't have any more questions here. Molly, Stephanie, should we hang on another minute or so and see if anyone else has questions, or we can also wrap up?
I think we're good. If anybody has any questions, we're also in the Pardot success community. So once Lindsay posts the slides and the recording from today, you can certainly ask anything else or private message us if you've got something very specific that you want to ask.
I'll also put a link in the chat box for the benchmarking report too, so it's easy to find.
All right, we'll wait another minute or so. Just everyone here on the line, thanks again for joining. Make sure you check out that chat window to grab some of those helpful links, link to the ebook, etc. Again, the webinar is recorded today, and we'll also be sharing the slides on the success community later today, so please keep a lookout for that. And thank you again, Stephanie and Molly, for leading this webinar today. Great content.
Thanks for having us.
Alrighty, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I don't see any other questions, so thanks again, everyone, for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.